Hello, and welcome to Recapping with Delora
and Ashley.
Please follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at Recapping Podcast.
Also, rate, review, and subscribe to our show on your favorite podcast platform. We're on all the things.
We want to hear your thoughts on the movies and shows we review.
Leave us a comment on Apple Podcasts or our YouTube channel, and we will read them during the show.
Or reach out to us on social media. We love talking all things entertainment and pop culture with you.
Thank you guys so much for listening.
Thank you.
All right, Delora. We are back. And we're going to talk about Jesus today. Are you ready? Are you ready? Yes. We're going to talk about Jesus a little bit today.
Okay. I'm excited. One of my favorite topics. Let's go.
All right. So, as I already mentioned last week, guys, this week we are recapping the Book of Clarence. It was released back in January of this year, but it is now available to stream on Netflix. Quick summary. A hustler in Jerusalem hatches a plan to become the Messiah, resulting in a series of absurd misadventures and this comedic twist on biblical stories. It is directed by Jeymes Samuels, aka The Bullets. Producers Jay-Z, James Lasseter, Jeymes Samuels, and Tendo Nagenda. Cast LaKeith Stanfield as Clarence, also as Thomas. R.J. Seiler as Elijah. Omar Sy as Barabbas. Tiana Taylor as Mary Magdalene, Jedediah, played by Eric Kofi Abrifa, Judas, played by Michael Ward, Verenia, played by Anna Diop, Benjamin, played by Benedict Cumberbatch, Pontius Pilate, played by James McAvoy, and Jesus, played by Nicholas Pinnock. Reviews: Rotten Tomatoes, 67% critic score, 80% audience score, and 73% of Google users gave this film a thumbs up. Delora, if you have a grade, what is it for the Book of Clarence?
Well, this film was interesting. I was hesitant to watch it because of, its sensitive nature, right? I was curious on the angle that this film was going to take, but because I do enjoy this particular director, Jeymes, he directed The Harder They Fall, right? So I was excited also to see a movie full of Black folks, really great actors, with a decent budget. So I jumped into this particular world. It was pretty much on the nose when it came to its rendition of that particular time in particular place. Like it was like what I've seen before, but there were actually Black and brown people versus the imagery that I've seen in the past. And so I enjoyed it. I laughed at several parts. I thought there was some needed and exciting growth that happens in the film, and I'll give this film a B.
Yeah. I'm not grading this. I decided based off of the fact that, to your point, originally why I didn't even think I was necessarily ever going to watch this, because when I first heard the premise, I was like, oh, this is blasphemous, right? Like, I'm not going to be a subscriber to this. Like, even as I was watching, I was thinking, like, as an actor or creative, I don't think I would have been involved in this, like, before it started. I think I would have been like, nah.
Right. I need to read the entire script before
I can't play like this, and also LaKeith Stanfield, outside of like Atlanta, is traumatizes me in the majority of his projects. Like even the one he just did on Apple was hella traumatic for me.
What do you mean? Like you're scared of him? Or
I'm not scared of him. He's in roles where bad things happen, and like from Get Out to like I said, the show he was just in on Apple TV, to even the one episode of Atlanta where you had, freaking Donald Glover playing the creepy Michael Jackson like dude. Who had to go to that house? It was LaKeith. Judas and the Black
Yeah.
Messiah. LaKeith is Judas. You know what I mean? Like it's just he as an actor, I go into his projects with trepidation now. Like I go into his projects like LaKeith, I don't know.
For me, it's the fact that he is such a phenomenal actor, and he is a very peculiar person outside of his roles, and his personal life leaves much to be desired. So sometimes I'm like, yeah, you just stick to the arts, and that's like that's how I'm gonna consume you at any point. It's through your work, which some may say that should be the only time, right? But
but separating art from the artist, we have this conversation all the time. But I will say that when I actually watched this, to your point, I did very much enjoy it. Like I think I texted you when I first watched it. I laughed and I cried on this movie. And I think the first time I watched it, I was like, oh, okay. And then the second time I watched it, I was like, what ultimate message am I really kind of getting from this and from this experience? And so I definitely want to kind of end on that note and get an understanding of like what ultimate message you got from it, because I told you, and I'll tell y'all just to start the recap, I had a very like crazy, I don't want to say crazy. My hairdresser and I talked about this when I went to the hairdresser over the weekend, and she freaked me out because the conversation went from talking about this movie to just talking about like spirits and like the spiritual realm. And y'all know, if there's one thing, if you listen to this podcast often, there's one thing I don't really do is ghosts and demons. And we really delved into that lane down to there being ghosts in her home and all this stuff. And I'm sitting there getting my hair done, right? So like I'm internally like spazzing.
From this movie?
Because it just, you know how you just take one topic and it kind of spitballs into another.
Sure.
And so
we do that all the time.
I slept with my light on. I'm be honest, I slept with my light on for a couple nights because I was really freaked out, but had nothing to do with this film.
It's called self-awareness.
That's okay. I know what I can handle. And there's just certain things like I'm still a child, I guess, in the way of like, don't talk to me about certain things my heart and my spirit don't want to talk about. And this is one of them. I don't want that stuff latching on to me and coming into my bedroom at night. You know, I'm still not over the exorcism of Emily Rose. Anyway, so I say all that to say,
I would never do that again.
Girl, I say all that to say this movie is, again, if you even have hesitation, this movie is not really what you necessarily think it is when you first come into it. And so,
and if you choose not to watch it, then, you know, okay.
Yeah, obviously. Absolutely your prerogative. For anyone who was like us and was like, I don't really know. It is not what you necessarily think it is. But let's go ahead and get into the film and we can discuss. Spoiler alert. Let's get into it. So we start off visually, bam, crucifixions, right?
I mean, I always am conflicted when you know the end of the story at the beginning. You know what I mean? But I was like, oh, they are telling it.
Girl, wasted no time, no pleasantries. And so among the men that we see nailed to these crosses are Benedict Cumberbatch, looking like the stereotypical white Jesus, and then LaKeith behind him. What were your first thoughts?
One, I did not see Benedict at all. I saw LaKeith on the cross, and my first thoughts, for those who may not know me, I was very much a church kid. So a lot of my foundation and my moral compass is steeped in the word of Jesus and the word of God, the Bible. And I was like, oh yeah, crucifixion was a common occurrence under Roman's rule. So it's not out of pocket necessarily to see his character on a cross. Now, and we'll talk about this more later. After Jesus, though, when Peter was crucified, he wanted to be upside down because he didn't feel like he deserved to die the same way as our Lord and Savior. So, you know, those were my initial thoughts. It goes even deeper than that, because I also was thinking, the Romans really had a chokehold. The Roman Empire was something else. And, you know, every great empire ends after 250 years. And, you know, they're saying the United States is knocking on that door again, these are the deep thoughts of me. So you're welcome.
Don't do this
everyone.
to us today. Don't do this to us today. I'm still tired. Don't do this to us today. Okay. My thought was like, okay, so this is going to be just not just a straight up like comedy in any capacity. Because once we start crucifying people, like, oh, this is about to get real. So
yeah.
What has happened and where are we going with this? So the film is split into 3 books, and book 1 is dubbed The 13th Apostle. We go to Lower City, Jerusalem, year AD 33. So Jesus is around in his full element. I had to pause at the sight of a homeless man, again, aka Benedict Cumberbatch, if y'all did not catch it on your watch.
Nope.
Because that man looked like he was in full blackface.
Easy. That, or I'm just like, he is, speaking church talk, he is seriously affirmed. Like, like, what are his affirmities? Because it was rough.
It was rough. And he's speaking to us, right? He's speaking directly to the camera. So it kind of made you wonder, like, how is this going to be shot and how is the story really going to be told? But then you see that, oh, it's actually a race. Clarence and his buddy Elijah are racing against Mary Magdalene, played by Tiana Taylor, and they're thwarted by some children who are gypsies who even steal the robe off of Clarence's back. But Clarence didn't pay no mind to this homeless man. He was kind of cruel to him even. Like, I'm going to run
Absolutely.
you over.
Easy. He was collateral damage for Clarence's purposes.
And he had agreed to this race to try and get money to pay off a big debt that he owed. And basically it's going to cost him his life if he doesn't pay back. What were your first impressions of Clarence? Because to our point, he was about to run over that homeless man. He stole that homeless man's robe. And he just don't seem like he's necessarily the best person.
I definitely thought he was a fuck up. Easy. Like, and I like to give people grace, but he was tip-tapping on my last nerves throughout the first half of this film. Like, he there was much left to be desired in terms of his character for me.
Did you enjoy this all-Black Jerusalem that we find ourselves in?
Of course. And I'm not gonna lie, the way that him and Elijah was walking around doing their little scenarios to get him out of his situation, it low-key kind of reminded me of Friday. I'm like, is this a Friday of like Jerusalem?
Especially with the weed.
Yes.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. And one thing I was thinking, y'all forgive me, I was like, the weed back in biblical times was smacking. I guarantee you. Because that was pure, okay? Untainted.
Is there weed over there, or was that a America thing? I don't know. I don't know my drug history. Maybe that's something.
What was coming up out of the ground of Jerusalem? Who knows? But if there was weed, I guarantee you it was potent. So
yeah.
Clarence's twin brother Thomas is one of Jesus' 12 disciples, and Clarence does not believe in God or Jesus being the Messiah. And as we mentioned, he's a drug dealer, essentially. The moral and spiritual conflict between these two brothers, I wanted to discuss for just a minute, because while Thomas was particularly hard on his twin brother and basically saying, like, you're a man of no honor, so, you're kind of useless and, all these things, he himself left his family when his mother was on her deathbed. So did he really have the moral high ground in their dynamic to you?
I mean, that's a great question, Ashley. And honestly, throughout the film, whenever this particular topic came up, I kept asking myself, what did he do? Like, what is it about this, his relationship with his mother that, because he seems like the type of man that would justify his actions, right? And obviously very self-righteous. So there has to have been a good reason, right? Unless we're talking about mother wounds. That's a new term I've picked up recently. And it's some serious stuff. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And one could say that he felt that he left for a greater purpose, for a higher spiritual calling and all of that. Like, I could definitely see that as being his justification for it. And maybe he's like, well, she had you. You know, it's not like I just left her alone.
Left her by herself.
She had you. But I think because of how strongly he came against Clarence, that's what started rubbing me the wrong way. Like, do you really have a moral high ground to stand on? Because, again, honor thy mother and thy father. Facts, right?
Easy, but still, even in that moment, I was reminded of he who's like never sinned, cast the first stone type of deal. And so
which
it's
Jesus
like
himself says in this film.
Exactly. And so I did feel like Thomas is hypocritical in that regard.
Yeah, I would agree. So Clarence goes to John the Baptist to try and get baptized. And I tell you, this was a hilarious scene.
I was like, oh, so we're doing it like this, where you just like turn the corner and somebody really famous is going to be there.
Basically, right? Because you didn't necessarily expect well, at least I didn't, because I didn't know who was really in this cast. So,
I did not know either.
You know, even when I first saw Teyana Taylor, I was like, oh, I didn't know you were in this. Then
I knew she was in it.
I didn't.
I did.
Then David Oyelowo
did not.
Oh, okay.
Did not.
Got it.
I'll tell you my big reveal at the end. I was like, y'all really smacked me over the head with this one.
They had a budget. And talking about smacking, John slapped a dog-ish out of Clarence and nearly drowned him for the audacity of him coming. Because again, this is Clarence's one of his ploys, one of his brilliant ideas to try to get out of this debt. It's like, oh, I found faith. I'm going to get baptized by the man who baptized Jesus. And that's going to help show that I'm, you know, redeemed and I've become a better person, even though how that was going to clear your debt with like a loan shark. Couldn't tell you, but okay. As a kind of Romeo and Juliet Shakespearean twist on all of this, Clarence is in love with the sister of the man who's threatening to kill him. Verinia.
Yep.
Did you enjoy the dynamic and romantic tension that Clarence had with her in this film?
I did not. And I was a little sad because she's gorgeous, and like shout out to beautiful actresses. But it seemed like she was busy lecturing him than actually like falling for him. And even with his, you know, being what he said, sandals over something in love.
Yes.
What did he say? I am spirit over sandals in love with her. I just wasn't. I didn't buy it.
I think he seemed so selfish as a character. That was what made it hard for me. Is like, what do you like about her?
Something else. Yes, exactly.
And then to your point with her, what do you like in him?
Yes, because he was not very likable.
No. Like, did y'all grow up together? Like, that would make more sense if we had like flashbacks and they grew up together.
And it was her like, you know, Clarence, get your stuff together and then maybe we could be together. That would make more sense if we had a little bit more of that story. But we did not. And from, you know, what we were able to consume, it was just one more stock in the wheel. Is that the expression?
Like feather in his cap?
Spoke in his will. It was another spoke in his will, his overall story, that made his debt even more dire, if anything.
Yeah. And also he was allegedly a virgin, which was interesting when his mom called him out on that.
See, I didn't know if that was a joke or not. So I didn't gather that. But okay.
She seemed serious, especially when he talked about him getting busy behind that curtain. I was like, oh my God, the shame spiral. Mom, stop. What are we saying? So Clarence has this brilliant idea, so he thinks, again, trying to figure out how to stay alive, to become the 13th apostle for, as he says it, protection, power, and influence. To earn his place as the 13th apostle, he takes the advice of Judas, of all people, to free slave gladiators to prove his selflessness. Clarence's fight with Barabbas, the immortal, was actually pretty epic, in my opinion. I was not expecting him to have any of those moves.
I did not know. I didn't either. Because again, he just seemed like the type of person that just gets himself in situations that obviously were not fleshed out at all. But I guess it proved his cleverness in that regard.
Exactly. Like, oh, I'm from the streets, right? Like, I know how to survive was basically his message. Because when you look at them, it kind of felt like a David and Goliath, scenario in terms of the battle, and how is he going to figure out a way to like trick his way out of this. So for him to have like the actual physical agility to stand up against him was impressive. And he does end up earning Barabbas's freedom and therefore loyalty. But Thomas was unmoved when he came back, right? Again, Thomas is like, I don't even want you to change. I just want you to disappear. Was Thomas too hard on his brother?
I don't know what it's like to have a twin. But again, based off what we saw of Thomas' character in this particular film, he was feeling himself being one of the 12 disciples, you know what I mean? And I mean, I don't believe his behavior was godly at all, but what did Clarence really have to show for himself?
Yeah, I mean, I think I understood why he didn't take Clarence seriously, because Clarence was not serious. But at the same time, it was such a stark contrast to the times that we do see the character of Jesus throughout this film. And it just made me again realize, like, y'all are really just mortal men, right? Like, y'all are still of this mortal realm, even though y'all are following behind Jesus. Y'all are still these types of people with your own internal compasses and conflicts, because it's not y'all decision anyway.
Exactly.
Knowledge is stronger than belief. That's something Clarence said a few times in this film. And it left me wondering, where did he get such conviction that there was no God and that Jesus was not the Messiah in this era? Like, I hear the arguments now where people are into science and they feel like they know certain things about science that disprove belief. But where did Thomas get this from back in this era?
Yeah, that's interesting, because if anything, the spiritual leaders of that time, they were concerned about Jesus's influence because they were losing their grip essentially on the people. So to your point, to believe that there's no God at all was a bit, I mean, obviously there's all types of people, nothing's new under the sun, but it was kind of shocking to an extent. But this whole, knowledge is stronger than belief, it's giving it, that really reminded me of Adam, Eve, and the serpent, the taking the fruit from the tree of good and evil, wanting to have the quote unquote knowledge. That's what that reminded me of, where it's like, instead of believing and being obedient to God and not, this whole garden is yours, just don't touch that one tree. And we don't know what fruit it was.
Couldn't be no fruit that good.
And that sounds like the original sin. That's what it reminds me of.
I think that's a great biblical callback. What I thought it could be, just me trying to spitball and think through, is when Jesus was around and performing miracles and all this, there were false prophets. So it just made me wonder, had he been kind of exposed to so many false prophets at this point, that it just made him not have any faith whatsoever. You know what I mean? Like, he had become and lived so in the world at that point that he's like, nah, all this is bull.
Yeah, that's a great point, because I felt like everything he did throughout this film was not necessarily far-fetched. And that's what made the movie not as bad as I thought it was going to be.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Clarence's next brilliant idea to become the new Messiah is the start of book 2 of the same name. I have in my notes the audacity it took to go to Jesus's parents, Mary and Joseph, to try and learn his tricks. Wild.
I really have the audacity scattered throughout my notes for the things he did throughout this entire film.
And again, major cameo with Alfre Woodard playing Mary.
First of all, I again, and then I definitely picked up on the humor and everything like that. And
I was just minding my virgin business.
Yeah, she was just like, everyone wants to know if I was a virgin, unsexed and unsexed. She's like, I was unmarried, unsexed.
Yeah.
But yeah, like talking in her face in front of her husband, talking about, I want to know these tricks. What?
Yeah, he had all the audacity is all I'll say. I was like, because just the disrespect alone.
Yes.
Of coming into my house and then saying things like this when obviously Jesus has never been a joke, right? Jesus ain't never taken himself as no type of a joke. So why would you come asking about some tricks? Like, you lucky that they didn't try to do something to you for even
kick him out. They showed him the love of God, okay, because they were definitely patient with him. But in some regards, I guess it tracks if he doesn't think any of it's real, right? Why would he have any reverence?
Just hella disrespectful.
But I also feel like there's a level of respect that you give someone automatically, regardless if you believe in what they do or not.
Absolutely. And clearly
basic human decency.
Yeah, and clearly he wasn't gonna get nothing from them and did not get anything from them because they know the story and the history of the Immaculate Conception and what they went through and what Jesus has gone through in his life thus far. So I put in my notes also, what a tangled web we weave when first we practice to deceive, because when Clarence starts performing these fake miracles, I feel like he sealed his own fate in terms of what was going to happen in this story.
Talking about getting got.
Like, bro, you really
because it was gonna come one way or the other, right?
Yeah.
So it was either going to be him confronted by the real God, right?
Yeah.
Or him getting caught up with people who want to exterminate. Oof. So true. Did you make that up?
No. What a tangle web we when first practice deceive. That's a saying, is a quote. It's probably from a book. I can't remember exactly.
I don't know about the practice that I didn't know that second part.
Yep. Because I mean, you really like, for us, obviously, we like, it's deeper. It's like, oh, you playing with fire, because we do believe. And so I don't like, it really was like, oh, you're playing. Like, oh my gosh.
Absolutely playing with fire, especially when he finally said the words.
Yes.
I was like, yo.
And his hesitancy should have told him everything he needed to know.
I mean, there's a level of intuition I think everyone is blessed with. And I think he had it, but he pushed through it. And again, there are consequences to repercussions to his actions. Okay.
Girl. And let me just say rather that he did realize the error of his ways and try to change and use the money he had collected for good, right? Because he decided instead of using it to pay off that debt to save his life, he did go ahead and pay off the debt of the rest of those gladiator slaves and free them.
Yes.
And unfortunately, again, though, because the deeds had already been done and you have the white oppressors, aka the Romans,
right,
coming around Jerusalem, terrorizing residents and searching for Jesus and the other quote unquote messiahs, his deceit, along with a miracle from God, allowing him to walk on water and not drown.
That was crazy. That was a turn that I did not expect.
I didn't expect that intervention either. God was like, "Doo-doo, here you go." Clarence got caught up and crucified in book 3 of the film. Now, alongside the homeless white Jesus stereotype played by Benedict Cumberbatch. Now, Benedict Cumberbatch's makeover and when he came out and he was prancing around was another very comical moment of the film for me.
Actually, to be honest, I did not know Benedict was in this movie. So when the scary man from the beginning got a makeover, I was like, shut the front door. Yes. I was screaming. I was like, yes. Oh my gosh. Yes. And it was peak hilarity. I mean, him, like you said, pouncing around. And, I think what is significant about this movie and what, made me interested and intrigued about it, especially being a movie about this time with Black people in it, is the conversation of God and the image that he is, right? And that image that Benedict Cumberbatch represents, the one that we grew up with, but I think it is definitely worth saying that it is convenient that the imagery of Jesus looks like that when knowing that the people in that time and place did not look like that. And it has a lot to do with the people who've won wars through the centuries.
Absolutely. I really enjoyed this throw into the film as well, because to your point, it is very plausible to think that there was this potential figure that people had assumed over the years because of misrepresentation of history was Jesus, when in fact there was this homeless man named Benjamin who got crucified just for the sake of Jesus performing one miracle on him, and then him essentially getting caught up in this hoopla of fake messiahs, right? It's plausible. You know what I mean? Very plausible.
Very plausible. And, from our understanding of scripture, at least from when I was growing up, Jesus was an unassuming person, right? Who you probably would have passed by.
That's why Judas kissing him was the sign.
Exactly.
You wouldn't have known. You wouldn't have known. I did cry when Clarence was getting whipped and was carrying the cross. That was when I cried. I think depictions of crucifixion throughout the years I've taken very, very hard. I didn't even watch The Passion of the Christ, but I remember we got a Jesus film in the mail when I was a kid, and I cried my eyes out during the crucifixion scene. It's just something so horrific about that type of brutality. That just still gets me.
Well, I'm glad that you brought that up, because it reminded me of The Passion of the Christ. I was like, oh, so we're going through all the phases. Yes. I thought we were just going to end up, at the end, but the fact that we saw the walk and we saw the people that he interacted along the way have such a change of heart was also so fascinating. I'm thinking about Cabbage. I'm thinking about John the Baptist. It was actually quite heartwarming to see. And again, the piercing of the side and all that being depicted, I just was very surprised to see. It also was hilarious with Benedict's character being up there talking about, Clarence is showing the mercy of forgive them, Lord, they don't know what they do. He was like, no, I want all the fire. I want all the brimstone placed on these people. Please revenge me. Had me rolling, Ashley.
He said, what did he say? Man is God's only mistake or something like that. He said
humans are God's greatest mistake.
Yes. And right, it's such a stark contrast too, because you think about it, Benjamin, the homeless man, has been treated horribly throughout his life. He just got this blessing and this miracle from Jesus, and 5 seconds later, he's put up on a cross. You know what I'm saying? his trajectory and his story, you get why he's bitter. Whereas Clarence just had a miracle from God and is now a believer. You know what I'm saying? He's like, yo, I don't know what I was thinking. I don't know what I was doing. He's real, and, God so loved the world type energy. You know what I mean? And so,
Yeah,
to your
I did
point, it
appreciate
was
that.
a
Yeah.
very stark contrast that they gave between those. And then the guy drawing or painting the picture of this white Jesus
Yeah.
that we now know in history.
And that was a funny word too, because he was the same guy that confronted Clarence saying, I think you stole my whole look, my whole get up. And he did. He really did. The other parts that had me rolling, Ashley, was our dude, the immortal. What was his name? Barabbas, the immortal. I was like, yo, he really is immortal.
Yo, I thought they got him. So when he took that spear out and he popped back up, I said, okay, God bless. God bless. Especially because he's from like a British show where it was like on Netflix. I'm blanking on the name right now.
He was in a French show.
Maybe it was French.
Wasn't he Lappin?
Maybe, yes. Okay, it was French. And I remember seeing him in that, and I was like, oh, I didn't know you were going to be in this, right? So then I was like, you can't die. You know what I mean? Like, not even just for biblical reasons, but like as an actor, you just, you can't die. So that was definitely miraculous.
Oh, no, he's not in that. I thought that was him, but it's another Black man. Apparently.
Oh, he looks just like him.
Well, I'm looking at, oh, no, this is just his highest rated. Let's see.
No, it is him. Lupin. Omar
It's not showing up.
Lupin.
Oh, yeah. It was the movie. Sorry. I'm looking at Rotten Tomatoes. They show the movies on top and then the TV shows are at the bottom. But yes, that's Lupin.
So to wrap this film up, Jesus comes and resurrects Clarence. Again, leaving Clarence a true believer. Couple questions. Did you feel Clarence deserved resurrection? And what message did you take from this alternate retelling of history?
I'm not God, so I don't have.
I knew you were going to say that. I knew you were going to say, like, who am I to judge?
Who am I? He said he should come back. He's here. Got it. What I think about this depiction, again, imagery is very powerful. Even though this was very much a tongue-in-cheek kind of film, but to see beautiful Black people in our element, probably the people who would have been there, was something to see. And I'm glad I got a chance to see it.
For sure. I'm still thinking about the ultimate message of this movie days later, because like, I think part of me feels like, and I read this article, I can't remember if it was what publication it was on, but basically they were saying that this is just offering us as an audience a potential alternative that we may not have thought about in terms of what stories have been left out, right? Like what stories have been forgotten by folks who may have existed and been around in this era when Jesus was alive. And I was like, well, if you think about it, this movie really stuck, to your point, very closely to the biblical depictions and telling that we've come to know, because even the director said he grew up and is very well versed, I guess, in the Bible and all this, so he didn't want to stray from that. And so part of me is like, what if there are, because to your point with the victors and things in history, texts have been ultimately changed, even though the Bible was supposed to have never, this was not supposed to be touched. I guarantee it has been.
Oh, yeah. And I mean, that's the thing that happens in Revelation is like, cursed the man who adds or takes away from this text, and so we know entire religions are based off quote unquote added text. Some may even say the Bible between Catholics and Protestants are different. You know what I mean? So who added, who subtracted? Like,
yeah.
You don't know.
Yeah. And so I think to that point, again, it's just like, yeah, it does make you think. And I don't think this movie was ultimately offensive. I think it just offered some perspective, without, taking away from the fact of people's beliefs and, faith that people have in this, this telling of history and this telling of events. So I think it was funny. I think it was enjoyable. And ultimately, I enjoyed the ride of the Book of Clarence.
Yeah, in terms of like the overall message of the movie, I think to your point, I agree that there were definitely some charlatans back in the day, and is interested to see like how did their story end. Mm-hmm. I also thought there were definitely elements of the Black American experience that I was able to pick out in several parts of the movie, specifically the guy that Clarence owed a debt to. What was his name again?
Jedediah.
Jedediah. His conversation with the Roman about
great speech.
You think you have power over us. You think you enslaved us, but that's the problem. You can't hide our joy, our greatness. You can't stifle it out. And that's what makes you weak. And that's what makes you, pissed off. It reminds me of that docu-series called Exterminate the Brutes, where it's like the only reason why certain empires were able to be successful is because they just had better weapons. It didn't mean that they were necessarily smarter.
Correct. Who was the big cameo that you were mentioning at the beginning that just knocked you off your socks?
Benedict.
It was Benedict.
The stereotypical image of Jesus in that regard.
I was also shocked when James McAvoy was Pontius Pilate.
I saw James though, so I was happy to see him. That interaction was interesting. I was like, oh, because he was like, oh, so you just confessed to fraud. I was like, damn.
And then offered him a deal. I mean, he was like, I like you. So here's what I'm going to do.
Oh, and the other part with the Black American experience, when Clarence's mom was, one of the onlookers during his crucifixion. And they're talking about like, y'all always do this to our kids or something like that. Mm-hmm. And I was like, whew, whew.
Yeah. Message.
It was a message. But I think overall message, Ashley, I think it was trying to say anybody can be redeemable. Because the fact that Clarence was all the way in it towards the end, like full believer, to where God was like, you know what? I mean, that also shows parallels to Saul, who we know as Paul, right? He was egregious. He was awful. And guess what? God was able to redeem him, and he was one of the greatest apostles. So writing all the books to all these churches, Corinthians and what have you. So yeah.
So ultimately it's a message of belief and faith.
Mm-hmm. We're all redeemable.
All right. Well, and that was a Forbes article that I was mentioning about them talking about the alternative history. That wraps up our recap of the Book of Clarence. If you have not seen it again, it is available to watch on Netflix. Delora, let's get into these hidden gems for the week. What you got for the people?
I have an interesting hidden gem. It's on Prime. It's a reality TV show called The GOAT. So it's pretty much a house full of reality TV stars, and they're trying to be the greatest reality show contestant of all time. And what really got me watching it was our girl Lauren Speed from Love is Blind, Tayshia from The Bachelorette, and one of my personally favorite drag queens, Alyssa Edwards. just to name a few. They have people from Bravo reality shows, CBS, like Survivor and Big Brother, to MTV, and what was the name of is it Real House? The legendary MTV reality show.
Real World?
Real World. Real World, and several Bravo celebrities on the show. And each week they have they have two games that they have to make it through. One is individual for immunity, and then there's the team game. And they it covers the gambit. Like, some of these people are from freaking the Food Network, so there's like a baking challenge, and then there's a typical obstacle course challenge. So what's really interesting about the show is the drama that happens in the house, and everybody backstabbing one another on who's going to stay in the house, which is a key component to reality television. So I think it's interesting. There's a goat, and there's this process where they have to submit their the names of the person they want to, kick out of the house, and they feed the goat. And I'm like, this feels kind of there's goats, and speaking of biblical, there's negative connotation there. So I'm just like, are we playing games with something that could be really sinister? Anyway, my second hidden gem isn't hidden. It is an old school fave. It's The Prince of Egypt, a 1998 film. The reason why I'm bringing it up is because it's actually one of the better biblical adaptations, and it's so freaking good. And of course, the legendary song sang by Whitney Houston and Mariah Carey, There Would Be Miracles, is just a banger. Ashley, you didn't give us the story of your hairdresser.
Yes, I did. I talked about it at the top, about her talking about the spiritual.
But you didn't go into any. You didn't go into.
That's what specifics. I didn't want to go into any more detail because it freaked me out that bad. It's just she started talking about having spirits in her house, and it just really freaked me out. I thought you
were gonna apply it to like the movie in terms of like, was there something about the movie that made her start talking about spirits?
I think it was just talking about the Bible and, Jesus and God and all of that just made her start diving deeper into talking about the spirit, like spirituality and in the spiritual world, and how there's warfare going on behind the scenes that, we're all fighting, and then going even more into it. And I'm like, this is where I need to get off. Like, this is where I need to stop, because I don't like talking about stuff like this.
Got it.
Yep. All right. So my two hidden gems this week have zero to do with this film, but I didn't have anything else that I wanted to talk about because these have been the two that I've been consuming probably the most recently. The first one is Dear Felicity. It's a podcast. It's a Bad Robot production, which makes sense because J.J. Abrams is one of the creators of Felicity. Felicity is one of my all-time favorite shows. And this podcast has been such a joy to be able to sit with, because there's a host and she is joined by the actors who played Sean and Megan. And then they have guests ranging from Kerry Russell to the Scott Speedman, Scott Foley, to Amy Jo Johnson, who played Julie, to freaking Gina Prince Bythewood, who was a writer on season 1.
Really?
To WB executive who was on there. And so I, as a huge fan, listening to this, I don't have to go back and rewatch, because that's what it is. They're going through all the different episodes and talking about what happened and, the history around it and all that. But it has made me want to go through them as they're talking about them, to just remember all the nuance. Jennifer Garner, she's been on there because she was in Felicity as well.
Yes, I do know that. Yeah.
And two things I wanted to mention in particular. My high of so far listening, because I'm about 6 or 7 episodes in, is definitely the Gina Prince Bythewood conversation, and her talking about how both the characters of Julie and of Elena were heavily influenced by her. The character of Julie went through this whole process of trying to find her birth mother, and Gina went through that same process right before. And so she used her own experience down to the letter that she gave her birth mother was used verbatim in the show, was just like such a gem. Right.
Wow.
I shouldn't even call it a low, but just something that like rubbed me the wrong way. A WB executive was on there and the host asked her, who are you least surprised became really famous and who are you most surprised? Least surprised, she said, oh, Sarah Michelle Gellar, because she was always so poised and all this, even as a teenager, what have you. Most surprising, she said Sean and Marlon Wayans. And I literally was in my car and I said, you're stupid.
What?
Because, ma'am, are you not aware that they are part of a comedic family dynasty? You thought that the Wayans brothers on the WB was going to be the thing to make or break their career? When Keenan and Damon were already uber successful?
Exactly.
I was done, Delora. Done. Did you hear me? I was like, ma'am, you are someone making major decisions for a network. I need you to know your television and film history a little bit better than that. So I'll let it go. The host knew. She was like, they've always been famous, in my life. So this has never been a question.
Exactly.
This has never been a question.
It is fair to say they've been famous most of our lives too. Yeah. Easy. Yeah.
Stop it. So if you are a lover of Felicity or just want to catch, like if you're someone who just enjoys like some of the rewatchable podcasts, there's all of them have so many now, from The Office on. This may be one that you'll really enjoy because again, you just get such rich stories from the creators and the people behind the scenes as well as in front of the camera. And my second hidden gem, Girls on the Bus. This is on Max. Unfortunately, it's already been canceled after one season per an article from Deadline. But I thought the first season was really well done. It follows 4 female political journalists, and they are going through the process of covering candidates for an election. And so you get a chance to see friendship and scandal and love. Speaking of Felicity, Scott Foley makes an appearance in this series, but our 4 main actresses are Melissa Benoist, Carla Gugino, Natasha Benham, and Christina Elmore, aka Lawrence's baby mama off Insecure. So it's just
like she looked familiar.
Yeah, girl. So it's just, I thought it was really well done, maybe because I was, enjoy journalism and enjoy that, part of the story as well. But I mean, I could have seen it getting a season 2. So I still recommend season 1 of The Girls on the Bus on Max.
Especially because we're in an election year. Wouldn't this be something to keep?
Maybe it's hitting too close for people because they like, I don't need that for my entertainment right now. We dealing with enough. So that could be it. But again, I thought the first season was done well. So check those things out, guys. But that is it. That is all. I'll be quiet now. We'll be back. Please share this episode with everyone you know. We appreciate it. When we come back with a new episode, give it a listen. But in the meantime, as always, be blessed.
Bye.